What's up, fellow furniture? It's Tables back at it again, being unable to resist talking about the gay for longer than one business day. Today we'll be diving into a theory that will change everything that we know about Jamugu, or Little Mushroom, a Danmei written by Shishi and translated by Zhao. To celebrate the second novel coming out, I think it's only fair I get to talk about this theory. Remember, if you like this video and want to see more like it, consider doing the normal YouTube things. You should know what they are. And now that I did my YouTuber plug, it's time to dive in. This was a working theory while I was reading the first novel, but I didn't really think about it too much until I was finished. At first, it was a tingle in the back of my neck that I've lovingly dubbed my author's sense. I felt like something was up with Lu Feng. Of course, he's flashy and important. After all, he's the great arbiter and the love interest of our little radioactive sentient mushroom. But I felt like there was something I was missing. Upon further deliberation with my cat and long brainstorm showers, I managed to scrounge together a full theory. Okay, maybe a few more too, but in the first novel alone, there's not a lot of solid evidence of anything, so I'll be going with my instincts on this one. Now that we've danced around the main topic at hand, the theory we're discussing today is Lu Feng's questionable existence. Now, I'm not the only one that thinks that Lu Feng might not be human, like we're led to believe. I've discussed this theory with other Little Mushroom fans, and we all seem to come to similar but different conclusions. What we all agree on is that Lu Feng isn't human, at least not as human as we're being told. Most of the evidence is pointing this same relative direction. In simple terms, Lu Feng is a form of the xenogenic. Although this adds to the questions about our favorite Geneva Convention breaker, for now it does answer some of the ones related to Anjay. However, we need to discuss the evidence that supports this theory, because my author's sense doesn't hold up in a scientific world. To begin this theory, we must jump to chapter 4, starting on page 41, as this is the first chapter that we meet Lu Feng. The obvious facet about the first meeting between Anjay and Lu Feng is how Lu Feng automatically and immediately figured out that Anjay wasn't human. That's not a normal skill for humans, which only makes it that more strange for Lu Feng when you remember that previously Anjay fooled several humans with his act. So if it wasn't the acting that tipped Lu Feng off, what was it? The next less noticed part about their first meeting is that although Lu Feng is literally pointing a gun at him, Anjay actually calms down upon making eye contact with him, which didn't happen previously with the other characters that pose a threat to Anjay. What was it about Lu Feng that made Anjay feel so calm in the face of lethal danger? Now this part is pretty interesting, as Lu Feng may have realized that Anjay was a xenogenic, but he didn't shoot right away as he did on-site with Vance. There's a couple mini theories that can explain this behavior. Firstly, we could have Anjay's species to a credit. As fungi, another plant or animal. When getting tests done, a doctor explains to Anjay that there's targets in DNA that can be detected in animal or plant xenogenics. But Anjay is neither, so he passes the exam and is released. Lu Feng probably has never encountered a fungi xenogenic with a human form before, so he might have been confused and decided to play it safe. The second mini-theory is that Lu Feng recognized Anjay immediately. Now, this one is a bit of a stretch, but just hear me out. We already know that sometime between the fall of the outer city and Anjay's employment at the garden, Lu Feng had figured out what Anjay is. Of course, he shed doubt on him the entire time and always knew that he wasn't human. But it was around this time that Lu Feng figured out exactly who Anjay is. Or is it? Is it possible that the reason Lu Feng didn't shoot at their first meeting was because he recognized Anjay as the mushroom he stole from? If so, was it guilt or curiosity that prevented him from pulling the trigger? However, the most important takeaway here is that no human could tell Anjay's lack of humanity. There's something about Lu Feng that allowed him to see through an impossibly straight facade. And just after this event, Anjay realizes he could feel emotion. This may sound out of nowhere, but just keep that in mind that a lucid xenogenic like him felt true emotion. Moving on to chapter 7, starting on page 109, this is the next time we get some substantial evidence about Lu Feng. Although Anjay as a character would deny it, he spends a great deal of time thinking about War Crimes McGee, and as he does so, he attempts at comparing him to humans and finds that Lu Feng feels entirely different. But Anjay couldn't put his finger on what was different. This is pretty important to consider when you remember that, so far, Anjay has been completely accurate in sizing up humans and understanding them. But he finds that he utterly can't do the same with Lu Feng, and he doesn't know why he can't. Shortly after, Anjay likens Lu Feng to having the ability to read minds. Now that might be more of a throwaway metaphor, but if we look at it the angle of Lu Feng isn't human, then could it be possible that Lu Feng could read minds to a degree? Maybe not actually reading minds, but something akin to that power? It's already made clear that Anjay can do seemingly impossible things thanks to his abilities as a xenogenic. So would it be so far-fetched to say that Lu Feng houses a similar power? Next set of evidence comes from chapter 8, starting on page 135. This is the chapter with a lot of evidence supporting one of the many theories about Lu Feng recognizing Anjay from the get-go. Here Anjay gets the chance to sleep in Lu Feng's nap room, and reads the journal of notes Lu Feng keeps for the higher-ups. But Lu Feng is in no way stupid. Even now Lu Feng knows Anjay isn't human, so why would he allow him access to the journal? Why would he keep Anjay close outside his obvious attraction? Here's another mini-theory coming right at you. If we go with the idea that Lu Feng knew all along who Anjay is, could it be possible that, with a knowledge of what's in the journal in Anjay's quest, he not only allowed Anjay access, but indirectly encouraged it? Was Lu Feng trying to secretly assist Anjay, either from genuinely wanting to help him or just wanting to see what will happen with Anjay's quest? This thought train has possibly the least amount of evidence, and practically contradicts later behavior that Lu Feng displays, but I couldn't get the idea out of my head, so there you go. So, upon reading the journal, Anjay not only finds out Lu Feng is responsible for the loss of his spore and where to look for it, but Lu Feng survived the abyss without complications to himself. We learn that even safer places outside the abyss are extremely dangerous and can wipe out full groups of people, and yet Lu Feng spent a great deal of amount of time in the abyss, the most dangerous place around, and didn't suffer any damage? We know that he's already a great officer, but that doesn't explain how he managed to do this. For someone with a human form to survive such a place, they would have to be either very highly skilled with backup, or have some sort of power in the abyss. Again, this might be stretching, but could the fact that Lu Feng thrived in the abyss be a subtle hint towards his xenogenic identity? As in, he used his powers or abilities as a xenogenic to make it through successfully? Later on in the same chapter, Lu Feng reveals he spent half a year in the abyss. That's right, he spent actual months there, but didn't suffer anything while there? After some more events with some other xenogenics, Anjay notes a few odd things about Lu Feng's physical prowess. First, he continued to operate at full mental capacity despite not getting any sleep. A total of 40 hours without sleeping a wink, but never slowed or felt the exhaustion. During this time, he also displayed immense strength outside of his size. He's by no means as small as Anjay, but he's also not the hulking mercenary you'd expect to have this kind of strength. He easily carried Anjay around like he was nothing, running and jumping like normal. Anjay even likened his muscles as to having an explosive strength that was entirely unexpected. This is unusual enough that I felt like it could be seen as more evidence supporting a non-human identity, but it could also just be one really strong guy. Next up, we have chapter 12, starting on page 199. There's a lot of things to consider here. Anjay does some more thinking about Lu Feng and finds that humans are driven by emotions. Regular xenogenics are driven by instinct, but Anjay, a lucid xenogenic, operates on logic. So he finds that Lu Feng shares the same characteristic, being driven by logic and never being consumed by emotion. Of course, you can make the excuse it's thanks to his training and experience as the Arbiter, but it's said by other characters later that Lu Feng has always been this way. So could it be another sign that he's xenogenic? A line I find to be very interesting in this chapter is where Lu Feng says he thinks of Anjay as being subjectively human. While he notes the changes in Anjay as he gathers more experience acting like a human, Anjay develops a more emotional personality. Lu Feng picks up on this and mentions it, but his wording implies something else, as if he was putting the subjectively human label on Anjay, because Lu Feng has shared the same experience as a xenogenic acting like a human. This moment is strange, however, if we look at it in that lens, because if Lu Feng was talking about his experience as a xenogenic, why would he be only hinting at it? When it comes to Anjay, he could just tell him that he's xenogenic, because Lu Feng already knows that Anjay is one as well. But he doesn't. He only hints at it. This line also supports the idea that Lu Feng knew all along what Anjay was, and was essentially telling him he knows. Later on, Anjay tries to talk about xenogenics and infections with Lu Feng, but is shut down by either redirection or just straight up ignored. This behavior from Lu Feng comes out of nowhere, as if triggered by Anjay trying to dig for more information. When Anjay continues, Lu Feng ends up acting very coldly towards him and stops any further conversation. Anjay gets very little information, or so he thinks. It was only when he started talking about the possibility of a lucid xenogenic does Lu Feng act this way, as if he was hiding something. In chapter 14, starting on page 227, Anjay gets to have a little chat with a doctor alongside Colin. Ever being antagonistic, Colin asks the doctor leading questions about what's being hidden from the general people, and leading questions about Lu Feng. Here we find out that while he was still training to become a judge, Lu Feng was found to have a 100% success rate at finding xenogenics. That might seem like he's just really good at it, but the doctor states that it's supposed to be utterly impossible for this to be the case. The doctor says that Lu Feng must have an innate gift for finding xenogenics, but even that is unheard of in humans. Additionally, because of Lu Feng's strange ability to be perfect in his job, he undergoes blood testing every month, but with normal results. Moving on to chapter 16, starting on page 253. This is the next time that Anjay and Lu Feng interact, and it's unusual. Up till now, Lu Feng has shown a sense of favoritism for Anjay, but upon meeting in the train, he once more acts very cold and uncaring towards Anjay. Later on, when asked, Lu Feng says this behavior came from a problem with himself, and that he was deeply troubled with something. Keep in mind that their last interaction ended with Anjay asking about lucid xenogenics, and Lu Feng acting oddly. So clearly he was bothered by the conversation they had. This could have several meanings, however. Through the lens of this theory, Lu Feng was perhaps bothered by Anjay practically stating that lucid xenogenics exist, either because he wants to deny his own existence or because he doesn't want to be found by the humans. Who can say in this moment? On the first side, without looking at it with a preconception, Lu Feng might be bothered with himself because he realized that he's actually attracted to Anjay and is unsure what to think of himself, subsequently acting coldly to Anjay. Either could be true, but without more solid evidence, we can't make a conclusion here. However, Anjay does gather more information about Lu Feng in this chapter. Lu Feng says outright that he has no doubts in his judging, and he's not worried about making mistakes. But he does share a thought with Anjay that really piques my author's senses. His iconic line, "Just what am I judging, and he will judge me in the end," casts more meaning than you might have originally thought. Here he explicitly is showing his inner doubt about his very existence and his position within humanity. And he might even be hinting once more to Anjay that he wasn't actually human, The part where my judging implies Lu Feng doesn't have the right to be making these calls about who lives and dies, even though just a minute prior he stated very clearly, supported by science no less, that Lu Feng was always right in his judging. So if he was aware that he was always correct, then why would he be saying that he doesn't have the right to do so? I believe here he's basically saying that he shouldn't be allowed to be a judge when he himself wasn't human. The next part of his line, "who will judge me in the end," also lends aid to this theory. In this part, Lu Feng is showing his uncertainty of his future and anxiety of his potential demise. He's not sure if he'll die by human hands or by xenogenic mutants, but he's hinting at the irony of it being a human to kill him. The second half of the line doesn't offer as much as the first half in relation to the theory, but he could still be inadvertently telling Anjay that Lu Feng was thinking about what happens to lucid xenogenics like them. After this crucial quote, Anjay attempts at getting information about the lighthouse, but Lu Feng shuts him down very quickly and coldly, which is the behavior I mentioned earlier that actively contradicts another idea. If we were to say that Lu Feng had tried to indirectly help Anjay find out about his spore via journal notes, then why would he act this way now? Why would Lu Feng suddenly regress and deny any more information to be given to Anjay? Here's where another mini theory pops up. Because if Lu Feng had actually helped Anjay before, then something must have happened to make Lu Feng change his mind. An event like the lighthouse making another secret breakthrough or a hidden threat waiting there. But Lu Feng suddenly tries to keep Anjay away from the lighthouse and denies any more information. Ever forward we go and jumping to chapter 17 starting on page 269. We get to the real substantial evidence. Xenon has been revealed to be an extreme oddity his entire life, getting top grades but acting oddly, very cold, logical, and dismissive, even more for the supposed rapid infection. Sound familiar? That's because Lu Feng has the same personality and characteristics, being almost exactly the same as Xenon. However, Xenon falls victim to an infection and becomes a xenogenic. Of course, discovered by Lu Feng himself. But another strange thing is that despite saying that he was unfamiliar with signs of infection in children, he still recognized Xenon as being xenogenic instantly. Next up is chapter 18 starting on page 279, where Anjay gets to hang out at the lighthouse and has direct access to practically every corner of the facility. This chapter has a lot of evidence to discuss, so hang on. Upon discussing Xenon's unusual circumstances with a scientist, Anjay learns a few crucial things. Just stay with me here, it's related to Lu Feng, I promise. Here Anjay learns that it's impossible for any xenogenic to breach the garden, and by extension, infect Xenon. Furthermore, he was the only victim. No other children or adults were infected, despite Xenon spending practically every waking second with his class. Although it wasn't mentioned in the novel itself, I couldn't help but think that the reason behind Xenon's unusual infection was because the infection was already present in Xenon, and he simply underwent a sudden and complete transformation into a xenogenic. I couldn't really figure out what could have caused the spontaneous growth of the infection, but I believe he was infected by the time he was born. If we think about his odd personality compared to the other children and the similarities with Lu Feng, it's possible that both Xenon and Lu Feng were born as xenogenics, but didn't mutate and remain somewhat human. After Xenon is locked up in the lighthouse for research purposes, Anjay makes a discovery. The main physical difference between xenogenics and humans are the eyes. While humans display emotions and have a presence in their eyes, xenogenics feel almost absent when making eye contact, an apt description for Lu Feng's legendary fanfic orbs. Xenon's infection and mutation gets worse, and he chooses to fixate on Lu Feng oddly enough, almost like he has a different connection with Lu Feng than with Anjay, the confirmed xenogenic. During one of these moments, Xenon states that all of you will die. Now, it's not Xenon's quote that matters here, but Lu Feng's response, saying, quote, "There's no person who won't die. Humankind will survive." Okay, the word choice here is odd, but can be excused by literal translation from Chinese. Looking at the grammar with this theory in mind, however, Lu Feng's sentence is strange. The way he said this line suggests a subconscious separation from humanity that Lu Feng might possess. Again, this can be excused just from the translation, so I don't consider this to be too important. Last in this chapter is a scientist in charge of studying xenon explaining that there's several documented xenogenic samples in the lighthouse. We already knew that Anjay's spore was being kept in the lab, but we aren't sure of the scope of samples the lighthouse harbors. If they've had these samples for a long enough time, it's probably safe to say that they've cracked some of the genetic sequencing of the xenogenics. This next chapter only has a small piece of evidence, but in chapter 19, starting at page 295, Anjay overhears a conversation between Lu Feng and a woman by chance. Upon the woman asking for Lu Feng to donate to the garden to further humanity, Lu Feng not only declines, he shuts her down completely, showing absolutely no interest in helping with making more children. This isn't too big either, but is certainly interesting. Lu Feng's actions here can be accredited to his personality and him simply not wanting to donate, but I decided to keep this in anyway. In chapter 21, starting on page 309, Anjay happens to get lost and end up in a place that allows him to accidentally learn more about the garden, things he previously had no clue about. First, he overhears a conversation between an increasing hourly rate in the children being grown in the garden. Anjay isn't terribly interested and moves on. But I am. Due to some conditions in the current generation of humans, the garden must grow children in tubes. But recently, they've apparently been having more strange conditions. But that's the extent of what we learn there. Anjay stumbles across a familiar little girl right after, and she explains what the Rose Manifesto is to him. And yes, this is still related to Lu Feng. Stay with me here. She explains that girls with a certain fertility index are raised to make more children, and are kept away from the other children who didn't meet the index. The girl, Lily, recites the manifesto, which as follows. The 23,371 women of the 4 bases with a fertility score of 60 and above passed the following manifesto with 0 rejection votes. I'm willing to devote myself to the destiny of humankind, accepting genetic experiments and all forms of assisted reproduction, to strive for an entire lifetime for the continuation of the human race. Wow, okay, so basically the girls, if passing the fertility index, are forced to accept experimentation for the betterment of humankind, along with helping in making children. Just the existence of this manifesto confirms that the Lighthouse are experimenting with children and genes. So it's not far-fetched to claim they might be experimenting with xenogenics and humans to create stronger humans. Alright, we're going to move to chapter 22 starting on page 321. Here we get to witness more interaction between Anjay and Lu Feng. And it's very obvious that Lu Feng knew that Anjay was getting up to something during the night. That isn't very important to the theory, but man does he have great deduction skills. What's most important from this chapter is Lu Feng clearly showing his uncomfortable feelings for his mother and hinting at a complicated situation between the two. Next up is chapter 23, starting on page 335. Lu Feng shows a preference to mushroom stew. Actually, this is probably just a little joke, but it kinda implies that Lu Feng is well aware of what Anjay is. However, Anjay takes this chapter as a chance to ask Lu Feng a few questions, and our main man says some interesting things. Lu Feng says that his mother is more or less a scientist, a strange statement considering that his mother is a part of the Rose Manifesto. He further adds that she apparently studied embryos herself, but not what she was studying. Starting on page 343, Chapter 24 stars more of Lu Feng refusing to help Anjay anymore with his spore. What's interesting about his conversation with Anjay is that it's pretty obvious that Lu Feng knows what Anjay is trying to get his spore. Throwing back to the previous theory, I still can't come up with a reason why Lu Feng would indirectly help Anjay to only at this point where Anjay is very clearly close to getting his spore back, continue to avoid providing any more assistance. It's possible that he's just playing with Anjay, or maybe he knows something that we don't. My author sense tells me that Anjay reconnecting with the spore at this time and place will only be a bad move on his part, and Lu Feng knows. Trying to prevent something that would be caused because of this. Thing is, I could be very much wrong, but this is still odd. Chapter 27 starts on page 381, and the scientist studying Sinan wonders to Anjay if the now fully mutated, but still somewhat lucid xenogenic, predicted the other magnetic pole's fall. His actions earlier suggested that he felt the change in the poles and urged Lily to return to the garden where she would be safe from the radiation. I mention this because Lu Feng didn't predict the pole's fall, but more importantly, neither did Anjay. If it wasn't clear at this point, then Anjay makes it clearer that different xenogenics have different abilities, as both confirmed lucid xenogenics have differing reactions to the pole's failure. This really helps another theory I mentioned earlier, about Lu Feng having powers or abilities that made him a superior judge, being surprisingly strong in his 100% accuracy in locating infected. That's different than Anjay's hyphae and Cyanide magnetic sensor. Did you have trouble keeping up? Here, I'll make it a little bit simple for you. Lu Feng isn't human, but he isn't a regular xenogenic either. He's a human-made xenogenic, genetically altered at the lighthouse to be a superior human. And Lu Feng knows. He knows who and what he is and struggles with that identity and his role in the human base. This only raises more questions. Why was he so unreliable about helping Anjay with a spore? Did he realize that giving his ID badge to Anjay would be the final step in reuniting the two? What are all his abilities? Is Sinan also a human-made xenogenic? Are there others we have yet to uncover? There's many more questions that I can't fit into one video, but for now I'll be studying the next novel, which comes out the day this video is released. I hope there's more answers soon, both for me and you. Who knows? I could be completely wrong about all of this. But above all, Little Mushroom is a great story with an amazing premise and well-written characters. It's enough for us to simply enjoy the gift Shissy has given us and appreciate its beauty. That's all from me today. I hope you enjoyed this video and support me in making more in the future. Remember, this is just a theory. A table theory.